There we go. Good morning, folks. I'm going to bring you up a little bit. That's what was going on there. Maybe something different. There we go. Now I'm not looking down at you. All right. So last week we looked at Epimedium. We looked at, this is Epimedium, common name in Chinese herbalism, Horny Goat Weed. And I wanted to look at this because, good morning, Danielle, because we were talking about kidney yang tonics. So that's what the focus that we're looking at is looking at this traditional Chinese herb in a traditional Chinese way, being Western trained herbalists. And we're going to formulate with it a little bit with other kidney yang tonics, with other things that can nourish or modify those energetics. So we'll kind of see what that is. So I want to go over first a review of what we're looking at when we're looking at kidney yang tonics. So let's break those down. There's two concepts that we're looking at. The kidney system in Chinese herbalism is the system of root energy, of ancestral energy, also of reproductive energy, and of the kidneys. But this is endocrine tonics. These are plants that are nourishing and building and strengthening to hormonal systems in the body, to particularly to sex hormones. Come in. Hello. Come on in. It's locked. Oh, sorry, I do that automatic. Hello. I'm just going over again the what we mean by kidney yang tonics. So the kidney system is that deep, nourishing system, that source energy. So these are often talked about as energy tonics. And I want to talk a little bit about energy. This is a concept that I'm talking about a lot lately. And it came up in class yesterday. It comes up all the time. Because we have normalized the concept of energy. I'm sure I've talked about this with you before. We've normalized the concept of energy in dominant culture here as being what coffee does for us, right? The feeling that coffee gives us is the feeling that we've associated with energy. And so when people say, I need more energy, I want more energy, that is the mindset that they have. That's the feeling that they have, because that's what we've normalized as, that's what getting more energy feels like. And the thing to remember is that that type of energy is really harmful for us. When we're drinking anything with caffeine, a caffeine affected energy level is specific stimulation of the adrenals, placing us into this fight or flight state, right? It is adrenal stress hormones coursing through our body that give us a feeling of energy, but it is ultimately depleting and damaging for us. Love coffee, but it is ultimately depleting and damaging for us. And so it is more helpful to have a broader concept of what energy means. So when we look, because we're looking at a Chinese herb, we want to look at Chinese concepts of energy. And so when we talk about energy generally in terms of Chinese herbalism, we're often talking about, we went over the treasures, the three treasures of Chinese herbalism last week. And one of those is qi. Right? So qi is energy. This is what we call acquired energy. This is the energy that we bring into the body through foods, through air, through water, right? The acquired energy. These are things that build energy reserves in our body. Good morning, Ren. So qi tonics are some really important tonics for helping us to increase the production of energy in our body, right? So acquired energy. I am not saying that caffeine is a qi tonic, right? Because it's not tonifying at all. It's stimulating those adrenals. So qi is one of the ways that we see energy. But jing, this is the essence. This is the root essence that moves through us. This is what we call sometimes source energy, right? This is the vital energy that kind of drives us, that primordial energy. What in Chinese herbalism is sometimes called congenital qi, right? This is the qi that we're born with, the qi that kind of lives in us. This regulates, again, this is the regulation of the endocrine system. And by regulating the endocrine system, there's some pretty powerful effects on energy production, on what we can feel as energy, right? If we think of the endocrine system, we're thinking of the thyroid, we're thinking about the adrenals, we're thinking about the gonads. So there's a lot of increased energy and increased vitality that comes from that as well. So we are looking with kidney yang tonics, we're looking at building this jing, this ancestral tonic. And that's what horny goat weed does. Horny goat weed, or Epimedium, is a classic kidney yang tonic. And it's nice. One of the things that I do like about using Epimedium is that it is a leaf instead of a root. And so often, so many of the kidney yang tonics tend to be roots. They tend to be the dense, sweet. Well, most of the tonic herbs tend to be roots. These are the adaptogens, right? And so it's nice to have one that is a leaf, because it's easier to use in formula. This is Epimedium. This is the horny goat weed. Yeah. So we are formulating with that. So I brought a couple of other herbs that we can kind of look at and see how, if we combine horny goat weed with these additional herbs, we can see how we can formulate and modify the energetics of a plant. So a classic combination here, and this kind of goes to what we were talking about earlier, hey, is eleuthero. So eleuthero is also called Siberian ginseng. This is the older term for it, Siberian ginseng. It is in the Araliaceae family, in the ginseng family of plants, but it comes from Russian and Chinese herbalism. So eleuthero is a qi tonic. So eleuthero is a qi tonic. It's increasing that acquired qi, the ability of the body to produce energy from the things that it takes in from its environment, right? So when we combine eleuthero as an acquired qi tonic and horny goat weed as a congenital qi tonic, as a jing tonic, then we have a balance of these two primary sources of energy in the body. And that's a really nice balance that we can use there if you want to kind of spread out that concept of energy and how we acquire that. Two other ones that I've brought in that are more kind of classic kidney yang tonics. One is ashwagandha. So I'm going to write these down because you're going to be playing with formulation with these. So we have our Epimedium. And then we have eleuthero, is what I just talked about. So then we have ashwagandha. So here again, generally when we see kidney yang tonics, they're oftentimes roots, generally kind of sweet and starchy. Sweet things, generally the flavor of sweetness is the flavor of tonification and nourishment in Chinese herbalism. So So ashwagandha is one of the classic kidney yang tonics. We use it for increasing vitality, increasing that jing, but we also use it. It is a really strong general endocrine tonic with a specificity for the thyroid. So it is particularly good when people feel that kind of loss of energy that is specifically around that metabolic functioning, thyroid functioning. Ashwagandha is great for that. The immediate effect, and now here we're jumping, this is one of the cautions of jumping from modality to modality, right? Now we're talking about Chinese herbalism with an Ayurvedic herb as ashwagandha, and going into some Western concepts here, but that's what we do because we are a global system, really with the crossover with so many herbs. What was I going to say about the ashwagandha? I was going to bring up something there. Oh, yes. So ashwagandha, in Ayurvedic traditions, there is an initial, a primary effect and a secondary effect. The initial feeling that it has, and then once the herb comes into the body and is metabolized, moves through various systems, there is a secondary effect, right? So in Ayurvedic herbalism, we see this, and that it is perfectly exemplified when it comes to ashwagandha. In ashwagandha, the primary effect is a sedation. The primary effect in ashwagandha, when you first take it, people oftentimes feel very, very sleepy. The secondary effect is an increase in metabolism, an increase in energy, an increase in vitality, and anabolic response. It helps to build up muscle tissue in the body, as is eleuthero. Eleuthero is also anabolic. And those feed into this concept of kidney yang tonics. Kidney yang tonics inherently are also things that nourish and strengthen the building of deeper tissues, of muscle and bone marrow, reproductive secretions, all of the kind of the tissues in the body associated with that kidney yang energy, also built up with the use of ashwagandha and eleuthero. So very good for people who have a hard time kind of building tissue, people who are emaciated, who have wasting diseases, people with long-term chronic diseases where there's cachexia, breakdown of muscle tissue, elders who have breakdown of muscle tissue and find it hard to put that muscle tissue back on, even youth who have a hard time putting on weight. Sometimes you see younger people with a metabolic activity that's so rapid, they just take in energy, that food, that chi, and they just burn it up right away. They need something to kind of hold that in there. So ashwagandha, eleuthero are very, very good for that. But you do want to remember that initial effect of ashwagandha being more calming. And so if you want to make a kidney yang tonic for a kind of an increase in energy, that energizing effect that we're looking for, especially if we're in this dominant culture, if we're looking for something to replace like coffee, you're definitely not going to want to use ashwagandha. You're definitely not going to want to, because that immediate effect is sedating. And I see very often people come into the apothecary looking for ashwagandha because they've heard it's an anabolic. They heard that it increases vitality and increases metabolism, increases energy. And so people take it quite often, like right before going to the gym, right before working out. And that initial effect kicks in and they feel very sleepy and very relaxed when they're going into the gym, when they're going and working out, not what they're wanting. So we want to remember that's a really important aspect in Ayurvedic herbalism. So if you're going to be combining ashwagandha in your formula, you are going to want to have that be a formula that is taken before you go to bed at night. That is traditionally when ashwagandha is taken. Or if it's in a combination, have it in smaller amounts so that you're not taking a large amount of it into your body during the day when you are going to want to be up and weight. The other kidney yang tonic that I brought is from Western herbalism, and that is Damiana. So we have Epimedium, eleuthero, ashwagandha, and then we have Damiana. So Damiana, another leaf. And so we wouldn't want to combine Damiana with like ashwagandha, eleuthero. It's kind of hard to combine those dense roots with aromatic leaves like Damiana. In a tea, you absolutely could, in a tincture or a elixir, something like that. But with Damiana, we do have an aromatic leaf, and so we want to use it respectfully. Damiana is more warming. It is more immediately energizing and stimulating to the body. It has that balancing effect. Damiana has an affinity for the nervous system and enhancing sensitivity and reactivity of the peripheral nervous system. So it's really nice for those people who feel like they don't have enough ability to process information coming into the body through through sensory processing, right? Sometimes for some people, sensory processing just is kind of low. They don't feel a lot. They don't respond to a lot. They don't taste things. They're not reactive. That peripheral nervous system gathering information and bringing it in is just kind of subpar. It isn't gathering that information. So Damiana increases the sensitivity of that peripheral nervous system. And so it can be very, very good for those people who feel like that could be an aspect of that kind of lower energy, that lower vitality, right? Low energy, low vitality encompasses a very wide range of concepts. And the more that you can expand this this understanding and kind of check in with yourself to see, how am I feeling this lack of energy? How am I feeling this low vitality? How am I feeling this loss of this kind of source energy? There's a lot of different ways that we can move in and give this support. So Damiana specifically working really on that nervous system, but it is definitely warming, it's stimulating, it's a pelvic circulating tonic, so it's going to help to move energy in the pelvis. It's very, very good for people who have a lot of stagnation, lack of movement there. And then the other tonic herb that I have for us is chrysanthemum. And chrysanthemum, we're going to be using not as a kidney yang tonic, but this we're going to be using to modify these effects, because we always want to remember that the energetics, even if we're using Chinese energetics, it's the same thing. The language changes, the concepts are the same. And so chrysanthemum, we're working with a lot of kind of warming, stimulating, drying herbs. And sometimes you want the effect of these herbs, right? But you need to modify, you need to balance that those energetics, because those are not going to be helpful for you. And so here we can use chrysanthemum, one of the premier tonic herbs of Chinese herbalism, but cooling and moistening and really nourishing, and just a perfect balance for the energetics of all of the other herbs that we've got here. So it's not necessary to throw chrysanthemum in there, but in your formulation, if you're feeling like, gosh, there's really a lot of heat, there's really a lot of dryness in this formulation, chrysanthemum is a great one to put in there. Orange peel. I brought orange peel in here because there's also a lot of that building, tonifying, nourishing effect can, when it is out of balance, can be a little bit stagnating, right? You're building, nourishing, building, but there's not a lot of movement with these sweet, tonifying, rooty herbs. And they can, in some people who have a tendency towards stagnation and cold, they can feel more kind of stagnating, not necessarily cold, because they generally tend to be neutral to warming tonics, but they can kind of contribute to a stagnation. And so I like to use some things that move and stimulate and break up that stagnation. So I have two herbs for that. And one of them is orange peel. Orange peel, the aromatics of orange peel are beautiful, light, uplifting, right? So we have a lot of kind of lower energy with all of these roots and these kind of root tonics. So the orange peel is enlivening and lifting and moving and stimulating, gives a lot more, again, movement and energy in the gut, which can be very helpful, again, if there's stagnation there. And it's uplifting, it's really lovely. And then the other one is cinnamon, because we always need something warming and stimulating and moving. We could certainly use Damiana for that, but why would you not want to throw cinnamon in if you can't? If you have it. So we have the Ceylon cinnamon to throw in there to give, again, some more direct warming and stimulation and heat, just pure heat in there. So if we look at this then, Epimedium 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, yeah, that's all of them. So if we look at this blend then, we can see that we could go a lot of different ways in formulas here. In terms of how you wanted to move the energy in your body, the energy in your formula. If you want to make something that's like a fertility tonic, for example, you could do a really nice combination with the Epimedium, which is a classic fertility tonics, and most kidney tonics are fertility tonics. These are things that are building up. Again, remember that Jing, that reproductive energy is in Chinese herbalism associated with specifically with fertility, because we're talking about the gonads, we're talking about the kidneys, and this is the reproductive system. So all of these are going to be very good for that. But the Epimedium is going to be particularly beneficial for that. So if we were looking at a formula for reproductive health, you could do Epimedium, Damiana, chrysanthemum to balance, right? Because you do have a lot of kind of heat. Orange peel and cinnamon if you want some movement and energy in there. Sometimes we want to quiet down the energy and movement in there, right? Sometimes if we're having if we're having imbalance in any system, we want to look at that imbalance and see, is it deficiency or is it excess? Is it hypofunctioning or is it hyperfunctioning, right? There's going to be some imbalance there. And that's why we use energetics, is because we're balancing that hypofunctioning, hyperfunctioning. So if we have a hypofunctioning of the movement of the energy in the gut, we're going to want to bring in these warming, stimulating plants. If there's an overactivity of energy and movement in the gut, we're absolutely not going to want to do that, right? We want to kind of quiet that down. So this goes very much to the specifics of the individual. I brought these for formulating today. We'll put them out. I didn't want to take the ashwagandha and damiana from the apothecary because we always run out. We're always using those, and so if I bring them over here, we always get grumpy. So our usual format when we're doing tea blends, you're going to look at the teas that I brought here and come up with formula. And y'all at home, you don't have probably most of these teas here, but you can kind of think about the qualities, the energetics, the organ affinities, all of that, and it's a really good practice just to think of formulations on your own with this. Think of some types of imbalances that they would be good for, and then how you would formulate. Even if you're not going to be here to play with the herbs, you can still do that formulation. Are there any questions about? Yeah.
Sorry, I missed the first part. So the epimedium, we can decoct it.
Yeah. So epimedium is a leaf. So it's really easy to extract. You can decoct it because it's not an aromatic leaf, right? All of the chemistry of epimedium is really stable. So even though it's a leaf, you absolutely can decoct it. Where I wouldn't really decoct a damiana because you've got those aromatics. It's less stable in terms of heat. But yes, even though epimedium is a leaf, you could absolutely decoct it. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes. What?
So it's summer.
Yes. It's hot.
They're all really horny.
Yeah.
Aside from the chrysanthemum.
Yeah. Yeah.
So trying to balance that out.
Mm-hmm.
I did something like epimedium.
Yeah.
Chrysanthemum and orange peel and damiana.
Yeah. Eleuthero is pretty neutral. Damiana is going to be definitely warming, but damiana and orange peel and chrysanthemum, that's just going to be gorgeous. No, that's going to be beautiful. I think that's beautiful.
Too overstimulating, like heating.
I don't think it would be. Damiana, orange peel, chrysanthemum? No, I don't. We could bring some rose over if you want to throw some rose in there. That would be really delicious. That combination right there, I think that would be delicious. So yeah, you can do that. And the rose would be cooling. It would be giving a little bit more cooling, a little bit more drying, but you've got the chrysanthemum there to balance out the drying. And you're not putting cinnamon in there. You absolutely could. And then you could throw in other classic moistening herbs too, right? If you need to do that. But yeah, I think that would be
some marshmallow fruit in there when I'm making it.
Right?
Ice cubes.
Ice cubes. That's why marshmallow ice cubes are so handy. You can just modify the energetics of anything. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll bring these over here and y'all can formulate. Now you should be formulating with parts. Because you no. By the way, other classic kidney yang tonics, garlic is one of the kind of classic kidney yang tonics. Very heating, very warming, very stimulating, very much considered an aphrodisiac in TCM and Ayurvedic medicine because of that fire, that stimulation. It's in that it depends entirely on if you're doing, how much like chrysanthemum and damiana kind of fluffy herbs versus the rooty herbs. But rooty herbs, it would be about an ounce. Fluffy herbs, about half an ounce. Combination, I'd go half an ounce just to be on the safe side. All right. Any questions from y'all? And if not, I'll let you go. This was a rather quick class today because we'd already discussed a few. I did have, you watched. I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, senior. Can come up. If you didn't see the class last week, it's worth your time going back and watching the Epimedium class, because I did go into it at length, and there's some fascinating stuff in there. Oh, one of the things that I did want to bring up that I realized that I forgot to bring up last week about Epimedium, we were talking about the fact that one of the benefits of using Epimedium is that it increases the availability of nitric oxide, which is a vascular relaxant, a vasodilator, increases blood flow to the extremities, to the genitalia. It's one of the ways that that horny goat weed acts as an aphrodisiac. And in that way, it's working on the same levels as some of the primary medications that are used for erectile dysfunction and things like that, because they are vasodilators. They increase the flow of blood into the genitalia. So nitric oxide increasing herbs and foods are really hip right now because of that effect. And so horny goat weed does that. Beets, you'll hear about beets increasing nitric oxide, also for cardiovascular health, right? For circulatory health throughout the body. It's very, very beneficial to increase nitric oxide content. What I want to point out is that there are, in our respiratory system, we have specialized cells in our sinus cavity that when we are nose breathing, when we're breathing through our nose, not through our mouth, because when we breathe through our mouth, we bypass these tissues in our sinuses. But when we breathe through our nose, the movement of air through our sinuses and down goes through and activates tissues that release endogenous, within our body, endogenous nitric oxide 200 times more than any other tissues in the body. It's a really effective and completely free way to increase nitric oxide in the body. There's a lot of focus. A lot of people are taking expensive supplements and herbs and all of that, trying to increase nitric oxide. One of the ways that you can reliably do that is changing from mouth breathing to nose breathing. Do that as much as possible, and that's going to have a profound effect there. So I wanted to say that. I realized that we talked about nitric oxide last week because it's a really important part of the mechanism of action with Epimedium, and I forgot to tell you that, and I was thinking about that later on, so I wanted to go over that because it's really, really cool. Anyway, there you go. There's formulation with Epimedium for kidney yang tonics, and yeah, I will see you next week. Thank you so much for showing up. Have a good week. Bye-bye. Yes. You got yours? All right.